be looked at. Because when kids go into kindergarten, they tend to want to make them comedians at that point, instead of letting them play and stimulate. What is the view of the foundation in trying to change that approach? In other words, parents want their kids coming out of kindergarten to learn how to read, to write.
Well, I think the answer to that is very simple. It's no accident that the most expensive forms of preschool education in the Caribbean involve things like the Montessori approach. And the whole approach is predicated on the importance of play and stimulation. It is helping the child to explore, tap in that natural curiosity. I'm sure you would have had the experience of looking at children even at the preschool level. You enter a preschool in the Caribbean and the children are normally very vibrant and active. They're unashamed to engage with you. They're not shy. They ask questions. They're full of curiosity. That's when they enter the preschool. And you see them 2-3 years later and 5 years later in primary school, and they are brain dead. You know, they're very stilted. Yes, because we are forcing them into a mold. And what we need to do in effect is to liberate the natural spirit of inquiry and discovery that every child has. And that now, later down the road, now we keep talking at higher levels, like at CXC level, for example, about innovation, creative thinking, critical thinking. All of that is already destroyed if we have the wrong approaches to early childhood stimulation and early childhood development.
What today's corporations need, what Google needs, what the ICT field needs, the Internet and Communication Technology needs, are creative thinkers. And our education systems are not keeping pace with what the corporate sector is looking for in young children or in its young workers. We know that the best way to reach even that cognitive development for a young child, the cognitive development that allows for math and allows for reading and allows for writing, the skills that parents are looking for, we know that the best way to develop those skills in very young children is through music and art. It's not through the ABCs, it's not through the rote 1, 2, 3, but it's through looking at the social, the emotional, the intellectual stimulation, the curiosity of a child. And it's in fact the case that, as Jules has said, that the expensive Montessori programs, the expensive Reggio Emilia programs, many of the very innovative Bank Street programs really operate off of stimulating a child's capacity to play. That's what you really want to see in the kindergarten, is a child playing, is a child engaged, with little bits of intervention from adults helping to guide that curiosity.
The majority of kindergartens in the region, as far as I am aware, are privately owned and run. How do you get them to subscribe to this new approach? Is there going to be need for some kind of legislative work to be done in this regard? Are you going to suggest that?
Yeah, well, a lot of work has been done already by UNICEF, for example, and also by the predecessor to the foundation, the CCSI, in shaping regional education, regional early childhood standards. CARICOM as well has a whole system of standards that have been recommended and adopted. The problem is that these things have not been either formalized in law or implemented in our respective territories, and that is part of our advocacy. We need to move rapidly where these standards are put in place. I mean, think of it this way. You know what has happened with bananas, for example. Right now with Eurogap, our farmers have to keep so much detailed information. They have such stringent standards to meet for the export of bananas. Now, if you need to observe those globally competitive standards for bananas, and yet you say rhetorically that our people are our greatest resource, and you have no standards in relation to as critical a sector as early childhood, where really is the message? So there has to be a move to adopt those standards. With respect to the reaction of the private sector, I would think that it ought to be welcomed by the private sector engagement in early childhood, because while the standards may require some higher investment on their part, in large measure it is about better safety standards and better pedagogies. And for example, some of the instructional and stimulation techniques that have been developed and experimented with through the CCSI will not require any huge financial outlay to be adopted by a private center. In fact, it will help take them closer to the Montessori type model. They would not have to pay licensing fees. It's a technology and an instructional mode that is widely available. And in fact, in the board meeting today, we were thinking a bit out of the box and saying, you know, the kind of, if you've ever seen a roving caregiver visitation, the kind of games that are played and the stimulation that happens with a child, we really ought to be training persons who want to be employed as caregivers, as nannies and so on, in that methodology. So that rather than a nanny of your child just simply changing diapers and feeding the child, they can also be stimulating the child while you are at work, you know.
The higher the standard, the higher the quality of the education, the more worker satisfaction there is in a job, which means that you don't have turnover and you don't have to keep constantly training people, constantly looking for new staff. So there's actually a benefit to the private sector providers of childcare that speaks directly to their capacity to retain workers within the childcare system. So yes, the standards are necessary. Regardless of who's providing the service, the standards should be set by policy and law, but there is a spin-off benefit for the actual child care provider, whether that's public or private.
Let me come to the foundation now. What impressed you? What motivated the foundation to become involved in this and to put resources behind this?
You mean behind young children?
Yeah.
Our mission.
And this particular new foundation?
Behind the FDCC.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So it has been a dream of the Bernard van Leer Foundation for many years to find a way in which to stimulate interests of a society as a whole in the youngest citizens. We have had this motto for a long time that young children are everybody's business. And so we've been trying to figure out a way in which to make young children everybody's business, not just the mom and not just the dad and not just the grandma, but everybody in society. So the FDCC, the Foundation for the Development of the Caribbean Children, is the first time that we've really seen a diverse set of very prominent, very powerful people come together around a really good model. This is the Roving Caregiver Program. And support it from the bottom up, if you will, and to really take up the challenge of making young children everybody's business. So we are very excited about the launch of the foundation, and if it goes well, or when it goes well, and when it's successful, we will be taking this model to other countries around the world where we're operating, like Uganda, like Israel, like the Netherlands, like Turkey, other places where we're trying to model this very same approach of the FDCC. So we're really banking on the FDCC.
So how will we know that it has been successful?
So one of the big components of the foundation's work, and also of the predecessor CCSI, has been to evaluate the impact on children. That's what the bottom line is. That's what every businessman cares about, every businesswoman cares about. What is the outcome for the child? So we've had the pleasure of being able to watch longitudinal studies, which are studies that could carry over a number of years, so we can look at what the actual outcomes are for the child of the programs that are already up and running in the Caribbean. They've been managed to reach 10,000 kids. We absolutely know that the program builds the building blocks for reading. We can see that in the data that's coming back. And when you have that kind